Welcome back to Creating Your Life on Money and Wealth, Episode 23, Debt is Slavery. Well, here we go. We're going to start a new topic in Creating Your Life on Money and Wealth. And to start off with, I'm going to plant the idea that the whole point of this series, if there's one thing and one thing only you get out of the Money and Wealth broadcasts I'm doing, is this idea that debt is slavery. It's not accidental slavery, it's designed that way, and there are people who profit greatly from you being in debt. Those of you in debt probably know a bit of what I mean, but I want to reveal some things to you that you might find uncomfortable, and as a result, I want to warn you, don't freak out. One of the reasons why I started with Creating Your Life, talking about the mind and blind spots and things you could hold subconsciously, different pictures that would be able to interfere with your ability to see what is true. I started out with that because I wanted to also address topics where other people can purposely implant images in your mind. They can implant ideas about what's true that can get in your way, in way of your ability to actually see the truth. And this is particularly so when you're talking about money and wealth. If people can plant images in your head that give you a false idea of what's valuable, how wealth works, how economy works, and they can do so to their, they can pick your pocket essentially, they will do so. And they do it primarily through definitions of things. So throughout this series and throughout the entire Creating Your Life package, I'll be coming back to language over and over again. But in the process, as these truths get revealed, I want you to be clear that what I'm talking about is not designed to freak you out. It's not designed to make you run off and get all upset with international financiers, government, all the other people and con artists who can be taking advantage of your lack of knowledge. Instead, it's to inform you so that you can begin to make financial decisions in a way that take into account what you understand. Hi, I'm Mark Andre Alexander, again back for more, and we're going to talk about money and wealth. Today, I'm going to just focus on debt and kind of give you an introduction to this entire series of broadcasts. So the first question is, who would you rather be, a person with debt or one with assets? Is it better to be a person who owes money or to be a person who has money owed to them? Charles Lamb, an English essayist, he said the human species is composed of two distinct races, the men who borrow and the men who lend. The Chinese, they had sayings, a good debt is not as good as no debt. One person who restrains his appetites avoids debts. Free from debt is free from care. So again, there's something about the idea of being in debt that is oppressive. And it's interesting how easily we live in a culture, especially when you have such a consumeristic society, that there are rationalizations all over the place that it's better to be in debt to have things now than to wait until you're actually able to pay them completely. Back in 600 BC, there was a gentleman named Aesop, an ancient Greek writer, and he wrote a series of moral fables to help the young understand certain life lessons, hopefully before they had to experience them too much directly. And one story is called The Ant and the Grasshopper. In a field one summer's day, Grasshopper was hopping about, chirping and singing to his heart's content, and Ant passed by carrying an ear of corn to the nest. "Why not come and chat with me," said Grasshopper, "instead of working so hard?" "I'm helping to store food for the winter," said Ant, "and I recommend you do the same." "Why bother about winter," said Grasshopper. "We have plenty of food right now." But Ant went on her way and continued working. When winter came, Grasshopper had no food and he began dying of hunger. Ant, however, had plenty of corn and grain. Grasshopper learned a harsh lesson. It is best to prepare now for harder times. Now, what the story does not reveal is how Grasshopper had spent the summer maxing out his credit cards in clothing stores and shopping malls, ordering video games online, and buying a new car with 6 years of payments. And when he went to college, he took out over $100,000 in student loans for his major in a specialized non-technical field, and the job he landed paid so little he had to live with his parents instead of buying a home and starting a family. So when winter came, he had nothing to fall back on, and he had creditors at his door threatening him constantly. So here's the idea. Planning for the future, doing it in such a way where you're not going to be in massive debt, is a better way to live life. As I record this, it's February of 2015. The Federal Reserve just released a report about student loans and debt, and how many students have now had to live at home. They don't have the money to buy a home. And so one of the fundamental causes of fewer homes being sold is the fact that students are getting out of college with so much debt and without the ability to get the job that pays for them to buy a home. They have to live at home. They have to pay off this debt first. It's a very unfortunate set of affairs, but it's one of the unintended consequences of something that I'll talk about shortly. People want you in debt. It's a fact of life. Your debt is their steady income. Okay, think about it. You do the work while they play. The idea is there ain't no such thing as a free lunch. Tanstoffel is what it's called. But there are a lot of people thinking, oh, well, I'm investing by getting into debt. By doing it now, I'll get something out of it later. And so they'll be talked into massive debt, and it doesn't quite play out the way they think. The idea of Tanstoffel, that there ain't no such thing as a free lunch. Anything that apparently is free is ultimately paid for by someone, and it ultimately comes back to you in one form or another, no matter how indirectly. Andrew Jackson was the 7th president of the United States, and even though he wasn't one of America's founders, he was of that era. He was 13 years old when he was captured by the British during the Revolutionary War, abused a bit before he was released, and he learned some lessons from that. But he was the founder of one of the founders of the state of Tennessee. In his second attempt to win the presidency, his supporters were many of them were the ones who founded what would later become the Democratic Party. But he had a ward, a young person in his charge, and back in 1883 he wrote a letter, and he said, "Live within your means, never be in debt. When you get in debt, you become a slave. Therefore, I say to you, never involve yourself in debt and become no man's surety." Now, the word surety, what it means is in the sense of being a co-signer to a loan. Somebody else goes in debt, but you're backing them up, saying, if they can't pay it, I'll pay it off. For him and for many of his time, the idea that there were money lenders and people wanting to get you in debt, and they often would even try to do it in such a way that it became a perpetual debt. And perpetual debt enriches people, while the people in debt have to work harder. So what we will explore together in this particular series of broadcasts, we'll talk about wealth, we'll talk about money, we'll talk about trade and jobs. And out of that, we'll also end up talking about government and taxation, about inflation and how it ties back into government and taxes. We'll talk about savings, credit and debt, which are really words for the same thing. It's interesting how they seem to be opposed to each other when in fact they are the same. And success in investments. If you ever reach a point where you actually have a surplus of funds and wealth, how to invest thoughtfully and strategically. We will also talk about the history of money in terms of U.S. currency. This is very illuminating. And again, this is one of the areas I say don't freak out, because when you go through this history, it reveals some fundamental truths about money, wealth, government, and paper currency. Overall, the series of broadcasts will help you understand the difference between wealth and money and why this distinction is absolutely crucial. Explore why people so easily end up in debt and enslaved to others, that debt is slavery, and we have a culture that seems to um, glorify it in some ways. Words like thrift and being frugal, sometimes people don't even know what those mean anymore. And you can go through years and years of schooling without coming upon them. Being aware of how con artists can pick your pocket through economic distortion and inflation. Know how to be a prudent investor. And finally, remember how others can implant false images in your mind by corrupting the language, as we learned in Creating Your Life. Okay, so that's all for now. In the next episode, we're going to explore what is wealth really and why it's different from money. In the meantime, you can go to markandrealexander.com to get more information, and you can see my book, Money and Wealth, What You Should Have Learned as a Teen, Book 3, on Amazon.com.